Hello and welcome to the next episode of Lost in Criterion. I'm John Patrick Owatari Dorgan, and with me today is a man who once chased his love into the pits of hell, I guess, and then also didn't succeed, I guess. Well, got her out, but then lost her again because he looked at her. It's very confusing.
Everything's very confusing. It's Greek myth as interpreted by French poet.
Right.
So
I was, I had some trouble.
Yeah, it's okay. I am the Adam Glass. This week we are watching Jean Cocteau's Orpheus, the second film in what is called his Orphic trilogy. A very loose trilogy.
Yeah,
having watched all three of them now.
Trilogy is a really polite word for movies that were made this substantially far apart, isn't it?
Yes. Last week we talked about The Blood of the Poet, the first film in the series, and that was made in 1930. This was made in 1950, and the last part made in 1959. The last one, I would say, is more closely related to these two. But
right, I would say the second...
The last one is kind of an old man looking back on his work. It's
right.
much more autobiographical, personal mythology.
Yeah. Autobiographical in a very abstract sense.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that
movie's
next
its
episode.
Own thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, the trilogy, really, it's more of a pair.
Yeah,
because there's not much of a connection between Blood of the Poet and this, but there's obviously connections between the last two, so that works out well.
I think ideologically we'll talk about connections between the three. There is a line in Testament of Orpheus that says that all art is just a self-portrait.
Yeah,
it's impossible for the artist to take himself out. And if Cocteau truly believes that, then he, of course, truly believes that every film he made is part of the same series.
Right, so he's the Robert Heinlein of movie making.
Yes,
all of his films are set in the same universe.
Takes place in the same universe.
No matter how convoluted that makes things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can accept that.
I'm just, I'm happy he didn't try to pull Beauty and the Beast
into the same continuity. Oh, no, it happened
trilogy too
in my film. So,
but
Orpheus.
Yeah, I will say that unequivocally, this is the first Jean Cocteau film we've watched, and there's only been 3, admittedly, but This is the first one I have watched that I actually enjoyed. Without qualm, without qualification. Beauty and the Beast had a lot of good going for it, but it also had a lot of
of unfortunate things.
A lot of questionable decisions.
So you're saying this one wasn't full of questionable decisions?
I'm not saying there weren't questionable decisions. I'm saying that I liked how it came together.
I will agree with you that this one I
was being polite. Calling the problems with Beauty and the Beast questionable decisions.
Right. Like this film, I will say, is despite what I said in the intro, had the most comprehensible plot of this.
Well, yes.
I mean, it's far more comprehensible than Blood of the Poet in every respect. But
this is also much more of a straightforward adaptation
and that's what
of the Greek myth.
Bothers me about it is that the way we see him presenting himself in the first film, right? And unfortunately I have to bring in Testament of Orpheus into it, which we'll watch next, presents it as though he has done miraculous things of art. But he made an adaptation of a Greek myth.
Yeah.
He's done what millions of people have done, even before him at this point. It's 1950. People have adapted Greek myth for all kinds of media.
But it doesn't make it less artistic just because it's been done before.
But I don't feel like he added anything to it. It is less artistic if you don't add something to it. And I don't feel he added anything to it. I feel like this was less impactful than an actual Greek play would be.
we watched Black Orpheus, and I really think that Camus, Marcel Camus, who directed that, we watched that a few months ago, and I really feel like he did something.
Yeah, I agree. And like when I compare that, we've had two experiences with the Orpheus Tale. If I compare the two experiences I've had with the Orpheus Tale, I prefer Black Orpheus. It is substantially more interesting and well made. In that, like, the plot is, the way it's presented and everything is more engrossing and more interesting to watch. This one, I mean, this one had elements that were interesting. I'm not going to say it wasn't that way, but it felt like, I took out singer and I put in poet.
Well, I will justify it this way. Black Orpheus and Orpheus both transport the Orpheus myth into a very unique culture. With Black Orpheus, it's a vibrant, beautiful culture in Rio de Janeiro, setting it during
it's okay
Carnival.
Yeah.
And then with this, it's the world of French coffee shop bohemian poetry of the early 1950s.
And here's a problem, Adam. It's very hard for me to separate my distaste for the culture it's put in from the film itself.
Well, they're also both
French
very much products of their culture.
Coffee shop poetry scene is probably the situation that would be the most antithetical to me. Okay, that you could have picked. He could have put it in anywhere else, and it would have been a more enjoyable film for me. Just right at the beginning, the sort of unbelievable amount of horse manure that was flowing out of people's mouths about poetry was mind-boggling, Adam. We literally I can't remember any of the lines. I should have written them down. But some of the beginning lines basically implied that, like, poetry is life. And then I don't want to be... Was he being satirical about nudism?
I can't remember what he said about nudism.
The princess, I believe she's the one, wrote a review. Okay?
Oh,
and it is a blank book.
Yes,
I cannot determine if Cocteau is being funny or just batshit mad.
Orpheus calls it absurd, and the guy he's talking to says, not as absurd as if she had filled it with
absurd words.
Absurd words.
But that's madness.
Orpheus is using absurd in the traditional sense of the word absurd, derogatory sense, and I think the other guy's coming back and using it as a sort of absurdism.
Right.
He's talking about.
But I have a question for you. Which of these two things that are being said are the voice of the director?
I don't know.
That's my problem. And I have that problem at multiple times in this movie, if I recall correctly.
Of what it's trying to say.
What is the opinion of the director? Because I'm supposed to be feeling what he thinks, and I'm not, because I don't know who he is.
Well, that was our problem, and the reason we formatted last week's episode the way we did is that Cocteau would probably argue himself, and unfortunately I can't read the essays this week because there's errors on the Criterion website, but Cocteau would argue himself that he's not trying to say anything.
Right, but we both know that that's madness.
The information. We know that that's madness and that an artist can be wrong. It's like, I didn't think about this last week, but in conversation with some other people it came up. Bob Dylan has recently announced that I think it was an interview sometime within the last year, he has said that all of his songs didn't mean anything. And in that instance, Bob Dylan is incorrect.
Yes, he is.
An author can be wrong about his work. And to say that it means nothing, whether you're Jean Cocteau or Bob Dylan, to say that something you've produced has no meaning, has no symbolism, has whatever,
right,
is nothingness.
Yeah, it's a mad statement.
And not
it doesn't make sense.
Not nothingness in a nihilistic way, but still nothingness.
Right, because even nothingness in the nihilistic way is a statement. You're doing something that flows from your mind into the real world, You are
Yeah.
inherently saying something.
To claim what you've produced is just a blank slate for opinion to be broadcast onto. You've produced a thing.
Right, and
that
now
means
it
there's
would be...
meaning to it.
Now, mind you, I think trying the purposeful attempt to make a blank slate could be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
But you're still doing something. You're making a blank slate. That's what you wanted to make. That's your product. You know what I mean? Like, you put yourself... But we're getting into the old movie.
Yeah.
But the point is that I don't know what our, in this situation, director, but the creator is trying... Which view he is coming from.
Yeah.
And that's confusing. I should know in a movie.
Well, the other half of it is that what does that do? Because the characterization of the princess at that point is only to sell her as a patron of the arts.
Right. But we all know who the princess is the moment we see her.
Yeah, that kind of comes up when it's revealed that she's actually deaf, and she's still a patron of the arts in that she falls in love with Orpheus and seems to be having suggests around as some sort of concubine thing.
Yeah, so she... and that whole thing is a little confusing for me. As a separate entity.
But at the same time, we don't... It's almost like a throwaway gag, but it's not a...
That's my point! It's not a joke!
There are presentations of that would be a joke on pretension. And this is just a blank book.
And I'm proposing to you that regardless of the author or the creator's intent in this situation, it was a joke.
Oh no, I still laugh at it.
Exactly.
Because
it doesn't matter that
his to me.
Like mind riddled with arrogance thinks that's the thing you can say.
I think I mentioned this before, that any sort of hyper pretension, artistic arrogance piece that I view, be it a film, be it a piece of physical art, be it some sort of performance piece, my response is to laugh at it.
Right,
because it's absurd.
And Orpheus didn't feel that way to you?
Like
once I hit that moment, the movie lost me as far as like being an actual.
There are of course
story.
moments like it, and that is one of the moments like it. But the rest of it,
well, but that whole coffee scene, like just has this implication, knowing that Cocteau was a poet and the things he says about poetry, it made my skin crawl. That entire coffee scene was him spending 10 minutes of the movie basically telling us that poets are gods and that the universe would not exist without them, and now we will watch these gods play or something. It was really weird, and then like I couldn't help but also laugh at the poetry fight. To me that was like just the funniest concept ever. We're gonna have a poetry fight. It was like They get into a brawl over poetry, and then the police, the police come, and it's like, again?
I think to an extent, the violence of the patrons of that coffee shop, and the fact that when they believe that Orpheus has killed Segeste, they come to, in an angry mob, come to his house and kill him, albeit accidentally, but they are still have violent. I think that is possibly commentary in the opposite direction.
Wait, which is confusing, Adam.
Yes, it's confusing, right? And I do not seriously believe that anywhere Jean Cocteau would suggest that. But then maybe he's just attacking the young people in general. For being possible. Impetuous idiots.
But like,
who react so over the top to everything just because they're young and he is the old wizened poet.
Right, so is Orpheus representing him then? Someone who's already been left in the dust by being like, what, 30?
Someone who's been left in the dust and will ultimately be killed by the people who have forgotten him.
But at the same time they call him like the world. And that it's so weird. That coffee scene like makes these really strange assertions that like, oh well, he's beloved by the people, but the people don't know anything, which is another like really arrogant artist statement.
Yes.
Like, oh, everybody loves his art, but they don't know anything. It was just a very upsetting scene, and not because the movie made not because the scene itself was upsetting about like, oh, the story is so intense. No, it was upsetting because the things that came out of people's mouths were upsetting, and left me going, really? Am I supposed to watch what evolves from this? And like the rest of the movie from there had its moments. I mean, it wasn't all insane. Like, I'm not saying it was bad per se, but like that really soured me on it for most of it, because it was so basically just so arrogant that it was upsetting. So
maybe in my view, I was able to just separate that from the absurdism of the culture and kind of ignore everything that was happening there, because I was just seeing it as character establishment instead of anything deeper.
And that's possible, but I just couldn't help but read into the art because I have seen Blood of the Poet.
I think you are right to say that it has meaning, because I think that Cocteau would not put a stray hair in the film.
Right, exactly.
Whether or not he wants anything to have meaning, he's still not going to put in
random
it's
meaningless
pretty
junk. Yeah. No, especially when you consider how closely he seems to follow the Orpheus myth.
Yeah.
This is not a man who lacks a day. I'm not going to say that. In a certain sense, he's a very good filmmaker, and that he is not lackadaisical about what he does at all. You know what I mean? Like, do I agree with his opinions? No. Man's a loon as far as that's concerned, in my opinion. But as far as his actual craft of filmmaking, he is extremely precise. Nothing is in the movie that he doesn't want in the movie.
Absolutely.
And you can see it, especially with the way Orpheus runs. It's only like 95 minutes, but it gets through that story at a very solid, reasonable pace.
Yes.
Doesn't feel rushed, doesn't feel too slow. It's just, I was soured by opinions that were stated, and just the general milieu of the environment or whatever. You know, I mean, I don't know if poetry.
I think that's one,
like coffee shop poetry society was not my thing. So
one problem. You know, we talk about in fiction. We talk about, well, in any presentation of fact, we talk about showing, not telling. You know, you want to show these opinions. You want to
right.
allow them to be experienced without just having a character present them.
Right, that's exactly what his characters do at the beginning.
So we get a lot of characters just presenting, just telling, and you know that is off-putting,
which is weird,
especially.
Go ahead, keep going.
Especially when they're saying conflicting things, and they're saying conflicting things that don't necessarily play into how they act later. You know, It's not like this is establishing motive. It helps establish characterization, yes, in that we know that Orpheus is well respected as a sort of ideal, but not in he's currently producing good things, which sets up why he's so obsessed with the radio station, because he's copying that poetry down and having it published, which is why everyone thinks that he killed Sagesse, because it's actually Sagesse's poetry that Sagesse is reading on the radio after he's dead.
Which is weird. Like, that particular plot point, from a practical sense, was strange.
Well, it just... The plot of Death's whole scheme is strange.
Yeah, that's
get Orpheus distracted by the poetry so that she can kill his wife without authorization for killing anyone, so that she can eliminate him and have Orpheus all for himself, even though Orpheus loves his wife enough to go after her.
Well, and it's weird because it does deviate as far as I can, because I've never read the original Greek myth, but I read about it, right? It does seem...
Orpheus not in love with Hades.
Okay, that's my point. Is like there's this weird deviation there that is kind of unnecessary. Like,
yeah,
like because it creates this weird, like, modern America. Even though it's like 1950, it feels very like we'll have layer upon layer of scheme, like for no reason, like because the story itself is very clean.
Well, I think having watched Testament of Orpheus, in some ways, this feels like a lot of this movie was set up for that instead of
yeah.
Because in a way, in a subtler way, Testament of Orpheus is a sequel to this, solely in that when this ends, Death and Artebis, the chauffeur, are sentenced to some unknown punishment in Hades. And in Testament of Orpheus, we find out that their sentence is to become judges themselves, and they put Cocteau on trial.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of this just feels like it was only made as a setup for a movie 9 years later.
Although I can see it not being. Like, that's the kind of thing that, like, he wants to make a movie that is basically... we're getting way too into Testament of Orpheus. But, you know, he wants to make a movie that is explaining his life's work. And it's very easy to make a trial scenario be that way.
Yeah.
And so, these are some very easy characters to pull from because he just made this movie 9 years ago. He's not made a lot of movies since
justification.
Then. Yeah. I can see it not being a setup for that. It could just be that that's the way his brain works.
It just worked out that way.
It worked out very well.
It's looking back, I could use that. And that makes
like
sense,
these guys.
And it doesn't ruin the previous work.
And I'm still in contact with all these actors. They're in my circle of, what did you say?
Wikipedia describes the people he knows in a single list as associates, lovers, and friends.
Right, so they're still in his cadre of associates, lovers, and friends. So it's very easy to find them.
His harem of ambiguous
yeah, right, exactly. I think that's the kind of thing you see on Wikipedia when nobody really knows. Who was Cocteau sleeping with, who was he working with, and who was he friends with at any given time. One side note, totally unrelated to what we talk about, okay, is a problem I've discovered with myself. I might be partially face blind.
Okay.
Because I continuously got Suggest and Orpheus confused. They both just look like blonde white guys to me.
It doesn't help that they're both blonde white guys.
Right, but I want to know, is that just me, or did you also experience some uncertainties at times?
There were some times early in the film before I well established in my head.
Right, okay, well, I should point out, yes,
the chiseled face of Orpheus.
Right, I should point out that it did go away. But for a good 30 minutes, I was like, who am I talking about now? Especially when they would be in the same room, and then it would be a cut, and I'm like, I don't know who I'm looking at.
Yes. No, I understand.
This is why color film helps a lot.
Yes.
Skin tone makes like exact hair color and exact eye color make a huge difference on figuring out who is who. For me, I
think I was going to say, in Testament of Orpheus, Suggest has black hair, which suggests that his natural hair color might be black, because they talk about how the other one was just a film. That's why his hair was blonde.
Right.
I think probably he's blonde instead of black haired. One, because if he had black hair, we'd be confusing him with Artebis.
Although their faces are not nearly as similar.
But their faces aren't. You're right there. They're definitely more visibly different. Plus, Artebis is always in a suit. And,
I like Artebis. He's my favorite character.
He is a pretty good character, even though he tries to seduce you.
I don't care. Seduce Eurydice as much as you want. He's still the only character I actually like.
She needs to get out of a relationship with her husband. Anyway.
Yeah. Her husband is a nut job, so...
Yes. Anyway, I think probably he's young and blonde as some sort of ideal of the poet.
And I found myself wondering for a minute, which is really weird and Aryan. Yeah.
Too,
I found myself wondering for a little bit, though, about that. When I got really confused about them a couple times, I started wondering, like, did he do this on purpose? I could almost see him thinking, like, okay, so the princess, Death, is obsessed with Orpheus. So it seems logical in a certain weird way that she would pick as her concubine, servant, creature, but when does she fall in...
A person who is essentially a young Orpheus.
Right, so when did she fall in love with Orpheus? That's my question. I don't know.
Is the entire plot of the movie a plot to get...
Right. Was she in love
Orpheus?
with Orpheus before she started toying with Segest, or does she fall in love with Orpheus upon meeting Orpheus?
Yeah.
Because she treats him like shit in the car. But that doesn't mean anything.
She does,
she
but
treats
at the
everybody
same
like
time,
shit.
Segest is killed by her minions. She then raises him, and he becomes her more poignantly, her servant, her pawn in the play to get Orpheus. So I would argue that it is all one plot.
Okay, which means that she's obsessed with Orpheus before the film starts.
Prior to our meeting.
So that means that it is somewhat logical that she would pick her servant in this plot would be somebody she finds to be also attractive in the same way. A poet who is blonde and somewhat chiseled face and that sort of thing.
Yes. It
makes sense. It's just confusing for me, but I started wondering, like, how much is this planned out?
I don't know. He is the platonic ideal of Bohemian coffee house.
Is white, kind of scrawny,
blonde hair, very obviously poor in dress, and
well, you wouldn't want anybody not blonde mixing into this whole art scene. That would corrupt it.
That would be terrible.
Yeah. Redheads are
the non-blondes are the financiers, not the
of true poetry.
Yes. One thing I liked about this movie more than any other Cop 2 we've seen is that it's almost, I think we mentioned this, it's almost as if Blood of the Poet was a sort of proof of concept test for a lot of the visual effects.
Yeah.
And in this movie, most of the same effects are used to actual...
Right, for purpose.
Actual purpose. And they work, and they're better.
They work, but man, he loves that fade-in, fade-out effect. And it only gets worse in Testament. But, like, he really likes that effect. Like,
he does.
When Cocteau figured that one out, man, I'm pretty sure he probably orgasmed. When he's like, you know what I figured out how I can do? Oh, man. And, like, just lost it.
Well, considering in every movie he's made, he's completely surrounded by his cadre of associates, lovers, and friends. He's probably constantly orgasming.
That's true. You've got a good point. I just spilled something. Mid-podcast. How upsetting.
Very upsetting. You're going to just have to sit in your wetness.
No, not on me. On a piece of paper, which I'm a little bit worried about.
Okay.
I've got to take care of. The things are under control. Although it did fall on a bunch of power cords, so watch out.
All right, if Pat dies.
I'm not really worried about me dying so much as the computer dying mid-recording.
Both things.
Well, we're good. We're good.
Would be bad.
I think we're okay.
All right. Thank you. I'm not going to edit it.
No, please don't. This will teach me to drink beer while I record. I'm drunk.
But yeah, obviously they use the mirror a lot more than they did in Blood of the Poet.
Right, to the point where it's actually the gateway through which you enter and exit the
and that's kind of a traditional interpretation. That's one of the reasons breaking a mirror is bad luck, is because it's seen as a portal to some other world. So that's it's not a new idea, but they certainly run with it.
Yeah, that's true.
And what else? The whole negative effect as they're driving to Death's house. Like out the window, it's the background is negative.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, that's because it's kind of we're more focused on her being cold to him.
Yeah, there's Yeah, some of that's kind of interesting. I mean, like, it's weird. Like, if this movie had been made by someone else, I probably think I would have enjoyed it. Like, actually enjoyed it. No, because it would have cut out some of that, like, the telling instead of the showing. Because you could have shown what they said at the beginning quite easily by just showing them interacting. You could have shown, like, you could have had some one-off pieces of dialogue about, like, you know, from Orpheus about, you know, what he's, you know, from someone else about how he hasn't written anything in a while. And then you throw in the fact that, like, later on they say, like, he's a national hero, or you could have even thrown that in earlier with him getting autographs early on in the thing, so it shows that he's popular with the populace, but not considered a great poet by the other poets. Then we could have Suggest at the same time being mobbed by the other poets, but relatively ignored by the populace. And you set it all up without having to go through 10 or 15 minutes of dialogue, like, just exposition.
And there's kind of half of that already there, you know?
Like, it is. Like, the actions happen.
We need the general public mobbing Orpheus as he walks into the coffee shop, and then he gets in the coffee shop and everyone ignores him.
Right, and you got it.
That sells that idea.
And, like, because the rest of the movie, lots of the other parts of the movie are fine. For me. Like, they fit fine. I like watching, you know, when he gets out to the house and, you know, he's sort of sneaking around and then he wakes up. That's all quite effective, and then he's with her-to-be's from that point on. But that all works for me. That's all quite nice story to watch. Like I said, the plot for her getting Orpheus is a little overly convoluted. We're starting to get into evil villain territory where, like, plots are so complicated that if any particular part were to not function, it wouldn't work.
Yeah. But then she knows her target so well. But if she knows her target so well, there seems like easier ways.
Right. Like, you get into that, but that's a classic James Bond kind of thing, right? Like, I mean, he knows him so well. He knows exactly how to lure him here. Well, then he should have been able to come up with a plot that didn't involve 15 different steps.
Or didn't involve luring him there.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, and so, like, I mean, I have some problems with that because, like, you know, you've got, again, the Greek myth, which just talks about Orpheus being so obsessed with his music that he allows her to die or whatever, be taken away. And like, you could have just had that story. And in a way, we do
have that.
Yes, we do.
In a way, we do have that. I mean, he's obsessed with the poetry, but he's being fed the poetry. As
which
part
also
of a
reduces
plot.
his agency in the entire affair, which implies that he is not a good poet. Which is a problem because Orpheus is supposed to be a very good musician.
Yes.
But our Orpheus is not. He's a plagiarist.
Yeah. Though, you know, I think in his mind he doesn't think he's plagiarizing because this radio station is just for him, in a way.
Right, so I mean, he could do that, like, well, God is sending me this kind of poem, or this poem kind of thing. But also, that's plagiarism.
I mean, I once found a set of papers that, there were 4 yellow sheets of notebook paper that seemed very much like absurdist poetry. So much so that I have read it on stage as absurdist poetry. But I still say, hey, I found these. It was weird that I found these.
But they sound like poetry to me. And then, to me, that's different because you have admitted where they came from and are interpreting them. You're saying that...
I'm citing my sources.
You're citing your sources, and you're saying, to me, this sounds like poetry. And so I'm going to read it as poetry, and I want you to understand it as poetry, regardless of what it is. It might have been somebody's shopping list.
Well, yeah. And I think in a way that's kind of happening too, because there are times when this radio station is just like a number station, and it sounds as much like poetry as it does sound like an absurd code. It's
right. It does actually sound like does sound like
when it started, I thought it was French Resistance.
That's what I thought too.
Being broadcast for some reason.
And to my mind, I was wondering.
I mean, there is a lot of ties to the aftermath of World War II.
Right, and I was kind of wondering because, like, I was wondering, I didn't do enough research on this, but I was wondering what Cocteau's relationship to the French Resistance and the war was.
The resistance. I don't know.
Because one of the things, a one-off thing at the bottom of the Wikipedia page is talking about how the tribunal that Orpheus is the trial resembles the inquest held by officials of German occupation attempting to discover members of the French resistance.
Yeah.
And which makes me wonder slightly, well, is he trying purposely to say, like, there's information hidden in the code? There's a poem hidden in the code, but it is still just code right now. Which would imply that Orpheus is an interpretive person, not just...
But I don't think that's true, because the way we get to the point that the rest of the poet community thinks that he killed Segeste is that there is a specific line from one of the poems that he has transcribed.
Right, that's
from the radio,
true. That's true. And
that
they
one of the guys
know it.
remembers. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I want to point out something. They kill him for that.
Yes.
These men are madmen. And the Bacchanales are worse.
Yes.
They are lunatics who basically want to have him crucified because he stayed out at night one night and left his wife alone and then yelled at the lady to get the hell out of his house.
Yes.
What is going on in this world, Adam?
I will say that scene was another one with an unintentional laugh for me, I think, at the end, because it is impossible to go up those stairs angry.
Oh, I don't remember that.
He really tries. The stairs up to their second floor are there's no railing. They look really flimsy. They're just wood framed, single 2x8s across a 2x8 frame, and it looks like he's trying to storm up the stairs, but also that he thinks that if he stops, he's going to break through the wood.
I didn't see that. No, I really wish I had seen that, because that sounds really funny.
It's this really exaggerated stomping that's cut short right before, and there's no banging because there's nothing to echo there.
Right.
So maybe he really is stomping, and there's just nothing to sell that it's stomping because there's no sound, and there's realistically no sound. But still, it looked completely
absurd,
completely asinine in the way.
By the way, okay, I got some more questions to ask.
Okay.
And I want your interpretation. First of all, is it just me, or, number one, how long was Orpheus out in the middle of nowhere? Overnight, right?
Just one night.
Did they literally, like, why is his wife freaking out?
I think it's the way he disappeared. He didn't come home, and when she started asking around, he had disappeared with a woman.
But like, you can't. There's no way that like people mention like he disappeared with a woman without mentioning like, oh, they were also with a guy who might be dead.
And the guy just died.
But like, to me, that would also put like I would assume that would contextualize.
The police investigators there. The police investigators there contextualizing that, but then again, I guess he's not, because it's Herdebees who explains that part to him.
Right, and so I'm really confused, like, why she freaks. I mean, like, she must be intensely insecure, which we do kind of pick up on, because she's constantly referring to the fact that, like, she doesn't see herself as beautiful enough for him, but he loves her deeply.
Well, I think there's also a portion where her friend is feeding into that.
Right, that's true.
Relationship trauma, not because she wants to feed into Eurydice's insecurity, but because she just doesn't like Orpheus and doesn't think they're good together. Or whatever.
Well, but because Orpheus stole her from her, like Eurydice was
a member of her
whatever it was. I forget. They said like waitresses or something.
I think they just called her a waitress, but
yeah. It's that part's kind of absurd. And then also, is it just me, or does Orpheus act like a 5-year-old?
Yes, Orpheus definitely acts like a 5-year-old.
Not just in that situation, but definitely in that situation.
Further commentary on the temperamentalness of poets.
I'm trying to figure out if it is, or if that's just the way that Cocteau sees the universe. Because a lot of his reactions to the commentary on his work is very much like a 5-year-old.
I think on one hand, maybe he's just taking that childlike wonder with which you need to see the world to write good poetry to its logical extension.
By being a 5-year-old?
Acting like a temperamental 5-year-old. But yeah, no. He definitely
And it's not just that point. There are several moments where I'm like, how old are you, Orpheus? Are you 30 or 3? But I don't know, that's just a problem with... I don't know if that's a writing problem, or if that's a director's problem, or if that's just some sort of purposeful commentary on poets. So, a bit of a loss there.
I don't know. Yeah. Again, for trying to read anything into it, I'm sure the Cop 2 would tear you apart.
I know, yeah, that's true. But, like, it's really, like... I mean, that's also kind of what this podcast is. Yeah. So we kind of have to. You know what we should have done? We should have just made Blood...
What?
I like what we did with Blood of the Poet, but the other option was to just be like, oh, we can't comment on this film. It's uncommentable.
Yes. He said so himself. We're not allowed to talk about it.
So please enjoy 35 minutes of The Girl from Ipanema.
Well, that's more Black Orpheus.
Yeah, that is. But, I mean, it's the only thing I can think of for waiting music. Ever since, what was that show that they had? You loved it.
I
No, he wore pajamas. Red pajamas. And could run really fast. It was really absurd.
Oh, Freakazoid.
Yeah, Freakazoid. They did, like, one episode, like, whenever they went to, like, something was happening, they went to intermission, it was just a girl from Ipanema over a field of flowers.
I think, no.
Wasn't it?
No, you're misremembering. It was actually, it was a classical work,
was it?
usually.
Why do I think it was a girl from Ipanema?
Unless I'm misremembering.
No, it's quite possible. I'm definitely going to go with me being wrong and not you. Maybe it's just because I like the Blues Brothers
I'm sure
so
it was used. I'm sure it was used, but...
Because I know that's the girl from Ipanema.
It's in the elevator in the
For sure.
Yeah, it's definitely in...
I mean, maybe it's just my love of the Blues Brothers.
Well, it's used a lot in elevator music. I mean, it's just kind of a cultural background thing. There's a really bad horror film, Ghost Ship or something. No, it wasn't Ghost Ship. It was one where some pirates show up. It came out in, like, the late 90s. I remember I watched it. My dad rented it, and it was just me and him. And for some reason, we watched this terrible movie. But, like, some pirates show up on this...
Are you thinking of Pirates of the Caribbean? No, I'm just kidding.
No, they're modern day, just not pirates, but
thieves. Is it a ghost ship that they show up on?
It is not a ghost ship because it is actually a giant squid or some sort of sea monster that attacks.
So it's not even like a horror movie. It's not a ghost. No, it's like a sci-fi original kind of thing going on.
It's an action thriller, but yeah, it was really sci-fi original quality. I can't remember the name of that.
I'm glad.
But they're on the elevator. They're on the elevator, and Girl from Ipanema starts playing. So okay, that is one of the other cultural.
But I assume that's just them referencing Blues Brothers.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So wow, sorry. Wait, rabbit hole. deep rabbit hole.
That's okay.
But yeah, no. I don't remember what I was gonna say. That's okay. Yeah, no, I don't know. Like this movie's the best. I don't really particularly love the underworld scenes. I like the film much better when it's in the real world. I find the underworld stuff to be a little bit overwrought a lot of times. Maybe that's just me, but I find like...
Well, I like films that explore the underworld as an idea. So in Black Orpheus, he goes to the underworld and it's bureaucracy.
Right, which is great.
Yeah. In this, in Constantine, they go to hell and it's just LA on fire.
Not so great.
In this, it's more closer to the Constantine thing. It's a post-apocalyptic destroyed
Right, it's French
Paris.
ruins. Right. Like
it's ruins, yeah. And then it gets into bureaucracy too.
Right, it does, and like it's weird because when they finally do get to that, I'm fine with it. It's probably also that Testament has colored some of my memories. I almost wish that I had been able a little bit of peek behind the curtain. People is that we watched them both at the same time, but like that I've been able to talk about one before we talked about the other.
Yeah,
because it's really hard to separate the two underworlds. But I do feel like they were pretty much the same, and I do remember not liking really either of them.
Yeah.
Like once we get into the underworld and we do this weird sort of gliding thing sometimes.
Well, I like
and
that was an interesting effect. It was very obvious that Heritibes was in front of a rear projection of Orpheus walking through to give him that sort of gliding effect, and that was really neat. And that's something that rear projection is very rarely, if I've ever seen it elsewhere, it's very rare. I don't know that I've ever seen it elsewhere. I can't think of any occurrence of it elsewhere. But having someone interact with the rear projection in such a way to give it a ghostly effect, I think, is a really neat idea.
And that was fine. It's not. I think it was the amount of time we spent getting there.
Yes.
Like, I could have done with
travel,
that effect for, like, a couple minutes.
And it was like 5 or 10.
Yeah, I feel like we spent a lot of time traveling through the underworld, which is basically a waste of my time. Because I don't know what it's adding to the story.
I did think it was neat that when they're leaving, it seems like they're just playing that video in reverse, because reversing film is a go-to effect for
Cocteau.
Yeah,
man,
as well.
That guy thinks that he's like, wait, I can run this shit backwards?
Yeah. But while it was just film run backwards, it was not the same film run backwards, because the woman with the cart in the background is actually walking in the opposite direction. The guy selling mirrors in the underworld for some reason, despite the fact that apparently underworld they only act as portals. So
the portable portals.
Portable portals. Oh man, that is
weird.
That's a tongue twister.
But yeah, no, I mean it's. I don't mind the bureaucracy when we get there. I mean, those kind of trials and judges things are fine. They're fun to watch sometimes.
Yeah.
But I feel like the underworld scenes are where I felt like the movie slowed down the most for me. Where they almost lost me. Where I was like, ugh, we need to speed up a little bit, guys. You're losing your audience here. We're not game for 4 hours of underworld.
I think part of the problem in that is that prior to that, we learn that Death is in love with Orpheus when she's asked if he's in love with Orpheus. And there's been a little bit that you can interpret that way, but then to find out just by her telling us, or telling a tribunal at that. And then we find out the same thing about Heritibes and Eurydice. I say that different every time I say
Eurydice?
it. Eurydice.
But what?
Go ahead. And there's less to sell that. And certainly,
really?
Certainly with Orpheus, with Orpheus it's reciprocal at least. With Eurydice, I don't feel like.
Now maybe I'm getting my timeline confused, but to me, Heritibes was more obvious because he is all over her.
Well, yeah, no,
in the real
just the
world.
fact that they're alone all the time, and he's very intent on.
Yeah,
her.
Like to me that reads.
But at the same time,
digging it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there to say that he was digging it, but the fact that it's not reciprocal,
right? Okay,
she is still worried about her husband, and
but like I'm really confused about something because like Orpheus, I'm failing to make sentences. For Orpheus, it is reciprocal at points,
yeah,
but he's still obsessed and loves his wife.
Yes,
and is. Ultimate goal. So I'm confused as to why he reciprocates with the princess, with Death.
Well, that is the right of a white male, isn't it?
Well, see, but I mean, like usually in our films, we are more clear on which is the love interest and which is the distraction.
Well, I think he's in love with both of them.
Well, that's the problem. Is they're almost equal, except for that one of them is impossible.
Well, Death, ultimately we get to the point where Death's love for him is only, is also very intent on his poetry. So, she ultimately sacrifices herself so that he can become the world-famous poet that she knows that he should be, and sends him back to his wife.
Right.
But, yeah. and then everyone dies again.
Right. Well, you're right, because it's a Greek myth. But you see my problem, right? Like, about not being clear, again, running into this lack of clarity. And lack of clarity is not always a negative thing in a film, but in this situation, it is bothersome for me that I do not know, because when at the times that he is in love with the princess, he is deeply, madly, and obsessively in love with her. But at all other times, he's deeply, madly, and obsessively in love with his wife, despite the fact that he's stomping around the house like a 5-year-old.
Maybe, okay, and follow me here. Maybe Orpheus has a twin brother.
Okay. And neither of them has a goatee or mustache.
Completely identical. They're completely identical, and one of them. Wait, no,
But that suggests.
Yeah. Suggests identical brother. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe whenever Orpheus is with Death, he's actually suggests.
Yeah, I kind of found myself. There was a couple times where that happened, where my mind wandered a little bit and I was like, wait, is that Orpheus? But no, those two things don't seem to line up for me. That he can be so, because when he is with the princess, he is all over her, and you know what I mean. Like, this is not a man who went all the way to the underworld to seek out his wife and then cheat on her.
But we're also coming from an idea where a place, an author who has a list of 20 people on Wikipedia as associates, lovers, and friends.
So I was kind of wondering, again, are we seeing a portrait of the creator here, in that, to him, this is reasonable?
There's this bit of info from Wikipedia, too. The actor who plays Orpheus, Jean Marseille, and Cocteau were in a relationship. They were lovers. He is referred to as Cocteau's muse. From 1937 until Cocteau's death in 1963, I believe. But during that time, he married for 2 years the female lead of Beauty and the Beast. So there's this amorphous relationship ideal within the culture too, of who is the lover and who is the friend, and why aren't we all just lovers and friends?
Okay, and again,
and that's,
I'm big fan of pretty much a big fan of literature that gets into that kind of stuff as a general rule. But my problem is that you don't typically see in works of art that depict that kind of view of the world, this sort of obsessive, overbearing love that you see him demonstrating with both of the characters.
Yeah,
it's too much. It's overplayed, I think, is the problem.
I don't think that the movie wants to be a commentary on that idea. I think it comes from a place that accepts that you can be in love with multiple people,
but doesn't necessarily want to make. It's not a topic of the film. It's just, this is just the way it is. I can see that, and it's fine. But for me, it made the, and so for me, I found myself, when he did that, when Orpheus was with the princess, I found myself wondering if she had somehow made him into a pawn, the way that she had made Segest into a pawn, where he had no control over his actions. That the only time he was in love with her and obsessed with her is when he was actually with her. Is what I found myself wondering, because it was such a rapid, quick fire change.
I think there's moments where that could be true, but at the same time, her motive doesn't seem to be to get into some sort of sexual loving relationship with him. It is only to be able to sacrifice herself for his art. Which, again, there's easier ways to have done that.
Right. No, it's... Yes, there is.
Yeah.
There are. It's... The movie, for me, a lot of those kind of things are where it got hard for me.
Well, what you see, Pat, true art is tragedy. So without the tragedy of losing his wife and the woman who he might have been just psychotically in love with.
But he doesn't lose his wife.
Death.
In the very end, in a really crazy twist, Cocteau decides to make it all better.
Yes, until he's shot.
Well, that's true. I forgot about that. I got my order confused again. Yeah, that's true. He does get shot. But you know what?
No, he died. Everyone dies so many times in this movie.
I started getting a little bit lost in when deaths occurred.
Yes.
I thought for some reason, I thought he went back to the world, got shot again, and then went back to the world one more time. But no, right? He dies at the end.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. From the mob,
I think.
Right?
I don't know. I can't remember.
God.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
No, I can't remember.
Right? It's a bit tangled, right? Like, I feel like... because
it's convoluted, to say the least.
No, but I think you're right. I think he does get shot at the very end, and that's it.
Yeah. Yes.
By crazy people who think plagiarism is worth killing over.
But then, no, that can't be right, because after he's shot...
Right? Doesn't like hurt to be...
No, you're right.
I'm so confused. Gosh darn it.
Because after he's shot, the motorcyclists show up and hold off the police while they take his body back down to the underworld. And then the whole sequence takes place. So, where is he at the end of the movie? I can't remember now.
Okay, but wait. Wikipedia the rescue. Eurydice disappears at the same time the crowd at the Café de Poète arrives in order to extract vengeance from Orpheus for what they kill him after he makes Eurydice disappear, but before they're both sent back.
Okay.
Orpheus and his wife make it back to the living world with no memories of the previous events. Is the absolute last.
Yes.
He is shot when Eurydice is back in the underworld because he looked at her. Is when he is shot. When it's just him and hit the bees.
Yes. That is, you are correct.
Well, Wikipedia is correct. I was lost and confused.
Wikipedia reminded you. Yes. Yeah.
So there we go.
And it is after he is shot that he declares himself in love with death, and then she sacrifices himself to make him an immortal poet or whatever. Which again doesn't really make sense, but
I hope he's actually immortal.
In the idea that death here is his death, not the death.
Right? Yeah, we get, which is a little weird because we see her kill Suggest, which means she was also Suggest's death.
Yes,
which at least makes her a death rather than just his death.
Yes, but at the same time, his death dies, kills herself.
Right, which means he's immortal. He should start fighting crime.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, definitely with that chiseled chin.
Right, I'm sure he does in later movies.
He is the French Batman if there ever was one.
I agree completely.
Can you imagine if Batman was also an absurdist poet?
What a great kids Saturday morning TV show it would have been.
Actually, I think that's what Brave and the Bold is about. So,
I've anyway. Never seen Brave and the Bold.
It's very campy. It's very Adam West Batman television show interpreted to comics and cartoon. So it's they do a lot more than obviously Adam West could, but it's got kind of that campiness anyway. So. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we've reached the end of the rope with Orpheus. What do you think? Do you have anything else you want to add to my rants and ravings about it?
Well, we talked about the mirrors being portals to the underworld, but they also represent death in some other ways. Death appears in one without really using it as a portal, and it is in the rearview mirror of the car that Orpheus sees Eurydice. That makes her disappear. Instead of turning around, he glances at her in a mirror, which they really projected was going to happen.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, they really telegraphed that one pretty well.
Yeah.
Like,
anyway.
Don't look at a mirror! Like, Herdebeest has to say that, 9 times?
Yes, he does.
And then when it happens, he's like, well, saw that one coming. He even has a line like that. He's like...
I know he does.
Well, we knew that was going to happen. It's like, okay.
It happens. Georges Auric did the music again, and again, the music is my favorite thing about any of the Cocteau films. It's like I'd like everyone involved with Jean Cocteau films except Jean Cocteau, I think.
Yeah, it's really the case.
Yeah. Anyway.
I wouldn't call any of the acting bad or anything like that. It's really not like it's not the people involved. It's the man in charge of the people involved that's the problem. But
anyway,
yeah.
I think we're
So what's
fine.
What's next, Adam?
Well, next week we'll be talking about Testament of Orpheus, the final film in Cocteau's Orphic trilogy.
Kill me now, Adam.
This one starring Jacques. Huh? Can we not?
I said kill me now, but I wish I had been as sarcastic as that about saying "kid me not." That's a much better line.
Yes. So 1959, 9 years later, starring starring Jean Cocteau with cameos from Pablo Picasso and Yul Brynner, among other people who are part of that circle of associates, lovers, and friends. And who knows how that works.
Yeah. We'll try not to unpack that too much next time.
Yeah. Shot in black and white with a little bit of color. So they got that going for it too. So yeah, we'll talk about that next time.
Yes, we will.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Lost in Criterion, a production of With Two Brains. The show is hosted by Adam Glass and John Patrick Owatari Dorgan. Jonathan Hape did the music, and Adam Glass also edited it all together. Feel free to contact us by email via lostincriterion@withtwobrains.com or join us on the web at www.withtwobrains.com.